reminder though, did we?
Hello again, everybody. This is Teach Talk. It's our second take on the show today because apparently sound is an issue these days and it's not coming through.
It's working. It's working.
And there it is.
There it is.
So,
welcome to Teach Talk.
Welcome to Teach Talk.
AJ, Lisa, teacher educators, authentic dialogue, teaching, schooling, learning, conversation. That's what we're doing.
We're so excited to be here answering questions. We want you to talk back to us, though. So there's a live chat. And if you know our numbers, text us if you have questions or comments. We'd like this to be a dialogue. But we're excited to be here and have sound.
Yeah. So if you're new, bear with us. You'll figure out how this works. If you're a regular customer, you know what we're doing. We're not going to explain. Let's jump right into this question.
Answering questions live.
We started to answer it. And it was.
This is a good one. How do you disagree with your colleagues professionally, even when you believe their methods or pedagogy could be affecting the students in a negative way, especially when you're bad? This person said they're bad at the delivery. So how do I temper my professional conversations? And one of the first things we recommended was Crucial Conversations, this book. If you have not picked it up, we suggest doing so.
Tools for talking when stakes are high. I, of course, said my famous tagline, and Lisa's going to mimic me. We've done this already once today. Now we have volume though. Turn from judgment to wonder. I should have gone off screen. It would have looked really weird if you were, but some people are just listening. Anyway, I think this is really important in all aspects of life. This is about spouses, colleagues, friends in any profession. How do I communicate and have those crucial, challenging conversations? What we'll talk about for the next few minutes are our thoughts on how to do this in a school setting. And maybe it's different because there's more sensitive issues.
Well, and you're dealing with the lives of children, which always made it more difficult for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to take it or do you want me to run?
Well, I'm coming from the perspective of a special educator. And so my collaboration went across grade levels. It went outside of the school building to other service providers who were providing services for the students, advocates for the students, doctors of the students. And so those conversations carried inside the classroom and outside the classroom walls. And on any given day, what I usually, the catchphrase I use with my students is you have to be a communication chameleon. So that meaning you have to understand that you need to change your communication style depending on the preferences and the communication styles of those who you're speaking to. You have to cater to them in order to best serve your students. And so oftentimes the way that I spoke to one gen ed teacher was not the same way I spoke to another gen ed teacher, or one would prefer email even though they were down the hall, and that it had to be okay. Because what I needed to do is work with them on their strengths, their preferences, and their needs as an educator in order to understand how to more effectively meet the needs of the students. The students came first. And so in my mind, some of my preferences came last because I needed to serve the students. And to do that, I needed to cater to the needs of others and the preferences of others. But there's been plenty of moments where I've been sitting in a meeting and somebody told me, well, that student doesn't have enough gray matter. They can't do it. They'll never be able to do it. And you have to first temper your facial expressions. And it takes practice because it is things you feel very passionate about. But I suppose I think of it as in what is going to be the reaction to my reaction. And if I'm reactive, it's not going to better the situation for anybody. I need to be the productive part of the conversation if there's not going to be one, so that the conversation can happen.
Humility. You're describing humility. Like to a T, you're describing humility. So what we're giving you is kind of a philosophy on how to approach it, right? Be humble, be vulnerable, be patient. That's what I'm hearing you say. But you want actual strategies. You want like, oh my goodness, I think I just saw a teacher do X, and everything I know about teaching and learning says X is bad. What is my next step?
Take a breath. So particularly if you know that you are bad at the delivery, you stop and you bite your tongue. And if that means literally you're biting your tongue to be able to put some of that, pressure on yourself, or you clasp your hands, or you just sit and take a breath and sit back and count to 10 in your head. I mean, those sound silly, but there's strategies to help you stop.
And let's be clear, a child is literally in danger. And you, as a teacher, you need to develop
right.
the skill of reading situations
Yeah.
and not over or under reacting. And if a child is in serious immediate danger,
Get in there.
You respond with a focus on the child, not someone who you think isn't giving the proper care. Make sure the child is safe. You can worry about all that other stuff later.
Physical, emotional harm
immediate,
in the moment.
Immediate is the key.
Yeah.
Immediate is the key.
Then you
Our
respond.
judgment of other teachers. So I will tell a quick story in terms of the what do we, because I want to say I get caught up in this theoretical approach and I need to be careful, right? We had a student teacher that with whom we worked a couple of years ago. She, I think, like tried to file a report on her mentor teacher in like week 3 of the school year with a formal complaint about how the teacher wasn't meeting IEP goals and recommendations. And it turns out she had like an 1/8 of the story at most. And she jumped right to judgment and right to, I'm going to fix and I'm going to save and this person's wrong and I'm right and I'm the greatest ever. And sit down, Nellie, like slow down.
Take a breath.
Note your place in the world, friend. You don't know and so I mean, this principal almost kicked this person out of, actually probably essentially did, and kicked the person out of the building and almost said, you will never work in this district again, because that is not how we interact professionally. And that is not safe for kids. So just think about that. In the moment, I am righteous and I think I know better than, and I'm going to save kids. And what actually happened was you would have done something that was harmful to kids based on things you didn't know.
Right.
And so we have to make sure we have all our information. That's the first thing. This isn't about special ed either.
Right?
This isn't about special education either.
Right.
Ask questions. Build trust and relationship with your colleagues. The more trust and relationship, the more you stop referring to people in the building as duties and you call them by their names and encourage kids to do so. Change that culture. The more of that exists, the easier it is to have the crucial conversations.
Right.
So I'm on a pedestal, and I'm on an angry pedestal, actually, because the presumption that I know better than is a presumption that we do not want any teachers. You have to find that way in between the to quote Amy Guttman, and I don't know if we'll put this on the site, but between the insolence of office and the ossification of office, we don't want you just bowing your head and being like, well, I don't know anything, and I'm just going to keep doing it because that's the way we've always done it. But we also don't want you self-righteously, I know better than everyone else. So your first move is take a breath, ascertain, is a child in immediate danger, right? And then it's, what is my relationship with this person? How can I get more information? How can I ask questions? How can I realize that teaching and learning is developmental and it takes freaking time?
Right.
You're not fixing or saving anything in the moment unless there's immediate danger. So we have a lifetime of relationship with a child from grade level to grade level, from subject, from class to class, from teacher to teacher to adult, triangulating the relationship with the parent. Your job is to build those relationships, ask questions, and if it comes to the point where I have to say, hey, Lisa, I heard you talking to a student the other day and I was a little concerned about your tone. I trust that Lisa would go, yeah, I had a rough morning with my daughter. I haven't slept in 3 days. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I was good. Let's talk about it. Hey, do you need help? Can I take something off your plate? Right. Or Lisa, and actually Lisa and another colleague of ours, Carolyn, check me often. So again, when we get back to the reality of how you do that, we have built relationships and trust to the point where they will say to me, AJ, I think you might want to back out of this situation with this student with whom we work. He or she is looking to overstep bounds, and or you may be overstepping bounds. You guys have said that to me, and I think I've said it to y'all in some cases. Carolyn actually sent me an email the other day, and I said I didn't think you communicated that clearly to that student. You beat around the bush there, and that student needs direct communication. So I guess technically, I didn't think Carolyn did it right.
And we're never going to agree every single time with everybody.
If you want to use those words, I don't think she did it right. She had the humility to ask me, am I doing this right? Because she wasn't sure either. And Go.
That was an important step, though. The fact that AJ's asking me, hey, I have this situation with a student and this is the way I approached it. What do you, in reflection, what would you have done differently? He's taking that step in humility to be able to do that. But I think also for some practical tips on ways that you can actually communicate those things to people, you have to get outside of yourself. You have to get outside of your own head, and you have to imagine a question that anybody could ask about the situation in the same way and get the same response. So what I try to avoid doing when I'm talking to somebody is othering them in language. So saying, when you did that, instead of saying that, I would say, I was curious why those methods were chosen. I mean, you just
make it about the situation, not about the person. You make it
about the situation and not about the person. So even the way that you word things will be differently. He's going to put up this good book again. I've listened to this twice, and so I've read it twice, and my husband did too. But make your questions about either you or the situation instead of the person. So I don't know. Give me an example of something you would disagree with somebody about.
I think when people ask us this question, it's like I walked by and a teacher was yelling at a kid, like berating a kid.
That's a great example.
I walked. Okay, let's stick with one.
And so I would say
berating, like in their face.
Right. Okay. So I would actually ask them as a colleague to calm them down and help them to see the situation. I would say, what did you actually observe that had I walked by that class, I would have seen the same thing? And if you can say to me, the teacher was bending over with her face in the child's face, her voice was raised, and the child was sitting backwards in their chair in response, those are things I can say. If you were saying, well, all the students were sitting in their desks, the teacher was at the front of the room, and her volume seemed to be louder than maybe I would use in my classroom, there's a huge significant difference there. So I need you to give me evidence of what was actually taking place. And you need to think that in your head. If anybody walks by that classroom, or if anybody saw that same thing, would they have seen exactly what I saw?
But Lisa, do I intervene? So I'm walking down the hallway and there is a teacher and he is doing, or she is doing this. Do I intervene and say, whoa, what are you doing?
No, not in the moment. I would address it later, unless really physical or emotional harm immediately in the moment. So that would do many things, in my opinion. It would override the teacher's authority in the classroom, whether or not it was appropriate authority at that point. And it would also demean the teacher in front of the students and therefore get to an emotional place for that teacher and you as a colleague.
Who was probably already emotionally engaged.
Right. Because why else would we react like that unless it was emotionally driven? That's all right brain. It's not left brain stuff happening at that moment. So I would, I would address it later. I would just approach the colleague and said, I noticed so-and-so seemed to be having some troubles today in your classroom. I was just walking by and I noticed that you were talking to him or her. It seemed as if there was some emotions there. Do you maybe want to talk about that? And I've found that when I communicate with him, he responds very well when I do these things, and sometimes he doesn't, and I'm frustrated too at times. So
here's my chime in. My chime in is there might be a way to intervene in that hallway, and it might not be a skill that you've developed yet. Like if you're new to teaching. So let me be careful about how I say that. You could be teaching for a long time and still not have had an opportunity to develop that skill. But there may be a way to say, excuse me, sorry to interrupt. Can I help by watching your class, or is there something? Right. It's got to be careful and humble. And again, if you have the relationship with that teacher, if I'm intervening with Lisa, she's 9 times out of 10, however emotionally engaged, going to give me the benefit of the doubt, and vice versa. I'd have to be really gone to not accept her intervention, in which case I'm probably way out of bounds and I need it. Right.
But we built that relationship, right? Maybe we have a signal.
So are you starting to build those relationships with people in your building? And if not, because it's a long-term thing, again, it's not about the moment. The moment, it feels like it's about the moment because it's emotional. So there might be a place where I could say, hey, sorry to interrupt, but Lisa, could I watch your class for a moment, or can I do anything to help?
I was going to the copy machine to make some copies. Do you need anything?
Yeah, or hey, my room's empty if you want to have this conversation in my room. because you got to start with trust and teamwork, and we're all here for the same reasons.
Right.
You have to. So those are some ways to start those conversations. We actually need sentence frames and conversation starters.
Oh man, get yourself some sentence frames and sentence starters. Absolutely. The same way that we give students sentence frames to express their thinking and their thoughts. No harm, no foul in using those yourself as a professional and or in different areas of your life. You will have those conversations politically. You will have those conversations with spouses. Yep.
And the other time is instructional. So you asked me for an example. The other time is instructional. Oh my gosh, I saw her teaching reading and it's actually the exact opposite. You don't have to fix that in the moment. You don't have to fix that at all. That's not your job. But
you can observe.
How can you start that conversation with, hey, I'm thinking about our reading instruction. Can you and I get together and plan some lessons together?
Right.
Someone might say that's passive aggressive, and I say that's great collegiality. Like, I don't see the benefit of saying, I saw you doing it wrong the other day, bad teacher, and I'm right. No. I don't see a benefit to that. Now, when you read this book, because you're all going to, you'll find that sometimes we do need to be direct. Like, hey, I'm prompting this conversation because I think I saw. That's where that has to be a relationship that has trust already. That has to be a safe place for you and the other person. And you should invite others to do that with you, right? So if you're on a high horse all the time, you can forget about any of this. You can throw this book right out the window.
You can say anything you want and it will not be heard.
It's how you say it. That's the relationships you have. Okay, let's go. Next question. How you say it. Thank you. Great question.
Oh, this is one for us personally. This is interesting.
Can I read it?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Okay. No, go ahead.
What would you have done differently when going through school, now being on the other side? Like as a student?
The other side.
Now going through school, or like as future educators? It just says, what would you have done differently?
Oh my gosh. Let's just look at it again.
Now
when going through school. So
going through school.
Advice for people going through school, planning to be teachers. Maybe you're in a master's program, you already are a teacher.
Oh man.
Yeah, I think simply for me, I just, as an undergrad, I wasn't really that mature. So I would have been more mature. No, someone asked me this the other day. Go ahead. You've got an answer.
I would have gone out in the world and worked a little bit and understood the value and importance of education in itself. I mean, there's a significant difference very often in some of our oh man, I can't think of words right now. Non-traditional students, thank you, who have families or who have first careers and this is their second career and they've gone out and they've had to do the adulting thing, and then they come back to school. The difference in their conversations, in the quality of their work more often is higher, almost because they see it as it's value. It's so valuable. It's not just the next step. I'm not just going right to college. This is value, and this is beautiful information I've wanted in my life for a long time, but haven't been able to have. And so they are hungry for it in a different way, more often than not, but that's not always the case. So I would have gotten myself out in the world and gotten my little bottom kicked a few times before I went into school. And I did have jobs all through high school, all of the above. I was part of team sports. I was a leader in my building as a high schooler. I mean, all of those things, but I would have tried to do a little more adulting. My focus was not on academics.
And maybe it shouldn't have been, right? So I want to answer this question. So you supported what I was going to say, which is quite simple. I did not ever, it took me a while, even as a teacher, to realize the value, the like just the abject value of humility and vulnerability. And I know that I've used those words a couple times in this show, and those of you who know me are probably rolling your eyes, but like I didn't get, and some of you know, like I don't always act as humbly as one could, to put it mildly. It was worse when I was younger. So you asked us for our experiences. So I would say that I didn't realize the value of self-awareness, self-reflection,
self-care,
self-care, humility, and vulnerability. And so Lisa and I, as adult professionals, are still developing those skills. Right. And I can't speak for Lisa. I started developing those skills, those dispositions, if you will, so much later in my life and in my career than I wish I had.
Yes.
I don't know that anyone told me, and I may not have been listening.
Open my ears a little bit more and listen.
So shut up a little bit and listen. And no, I mean, my parents told me to shut up my whole life, and I didn't get it.
It is unbelievable how many times in your head you think, gosh, my mom and dad were right. And you never wanted to say that out loud.
And I don't want to be preachy about it. I think that, and the other thing that I would say is I'm fascinated, and I say this respectfully. although it might come off disrespectfully. I'm fascinated by the amount of undergrads who come into the teacher education program that Lisa and I work, within which Lisa and I work, and have never had a job in their lives. And they're 20, 19, 18. It's really hard to go into the professional world if you've never had a job. I do note that those people who, I mean, I started working at 13 and I probably had part-time jobs before then. Yep. So like you get a sense of how to have, this is the previous question, how to have those crucial conversations, how to show up on time, how to be present, not just physically. Those are practice skills. We don't expect you on day one, if you've never had a job, to be able to do those things. So the other thing I would say is, I mean, I wouldn't do this differently. I had this opportunity. My parents had me do this. I would get more jobs and do more volunteering.
Do more volunteering.
Even as an adult professional. So because even the thing where like we can celebrate, we have a reader chiming in and saying humility is the hardest lesson that she is learning right now. And I thank you. And say more about that too, listener.
It still is.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm sprinkling that because for me too, you're not alone. You're an undergraduate student. I'm twice your age. And it's still hard. Freaking hard.
It's still hard.
So the earlier you can start, and you've got to have like that long-term view and lens. But as an adult professional, as a 40-year-old, as a 30-year-old, as someone who's been teaching for a few years, and you're in the groove and you're fairly humble, is your only context your school building? Is that your only professional context? Or do you have somewhere you volunteer? Maybe it's your place of worship also that you play a role in. What are the other places so that you don't get, I say this all the time. No, I don't. I should say this more often.
You should say it, apparently.
Humility. Well, all schools, each school is so different from other schools. And if you've been in the same building for 10 years, you think that's how school works. You forget. Even the smartest, most intelligent, aware people forget. No, that's not the only way schools work. It's not the only way professional environments work. So varying your context within which you work and interact with humans and adults professionally, that really helps you continue to develop those skills. Awareness,
I would have gone to see every teacher possible. As an undergraduate student. And here's the thing. I was an undergraduate who changed her major 4 times, still graduated early, but did not go into education. So education came in my second degree, and then I continue forward into a couple of other degree programs. And every degree program, I learned something new about myself as a student. I probably shouldn't have tried to do my doctorate with a newborn. That was probably like choice number 1 I should have reconsidered. But as an undergraduate, I would have gotten myself in more study groups. I think that I didn't see the value in having that collaborative opportunity and the learning with others that comes from study groups, and that we don't always have to think the same way, but thinking differently can challenge our learning in a new and wonderful way. I would have gotten involved in more study groups. I wish that I had been more of an advocate for myself. I needed a challenge, and I like school was relatively easy for me going through for whatever reason, and I didn't challenge myself, and I really wish somebody had challenged me. I wish somebody would have said, wow, Lisa, that was kind of crap. Like, let's step it up a bit, and let's get yourself to the point where you're challenging yourself and challenging your own thinking. Not everything is an A+, a checkbox. Work harder on these things so that you know more about yourself as a teacher.
So developing those relationships, like we often say to college students, but we say to professionals as well, developing those professional relationships. And that, I mean, again, I talked about you and Carolyn and I and others with whom we work. I should mention other names, or I shouldn't have mentioned any, maybe because I can't list them all. Developing a tighter professional network that you have those really real, we've got to, it's something Lisa and I talk almost every semester about our own professional development and what we need to do professionally to get better, to move on, to change, to reinvent ourselves. And one of the things we say is, wow, we have a team that even when right now we're pushed, it's mid-semester for us. We're pushed to our limits.
We're at the max.
Pushed beyond our limits. Gosh, I love this team. Gosh, I love the people I work with. And they support me. They offer challenge. We had a mentor-teacher workshop last night. We talked about mentoring, supporting, offering challenge, and fostering professional vision. If our team does anything, it's those 3 things. So getting those people around you and doing that purposely and having fun, enjoying yourselves, being reflective. Another thing that you said that I wanted to jump on, that I would have done differently. My master's program, my master's in educational leadership at Bank Street College of Education. That's a plug. That was very purposeful. Bank Street is an amazing place. Check it out. I have no idea why they let me go there, but whatever. They did. And it was one of the most amazing. It probably helped me resurrect my career because I was about as burnt out as I could have been at that time. We had to visit, like part of the program was get into as many schools as you possibly could. I saw more public and private schools in New York City and northern New Jersey than I ever could have imagined. Imagine touring buildings, sitting in classrooms, talking to principals. Whoa!
Go beyond public schools is where I wanted to plug.
Public and private and charter,
public, charter, private. Go visit some homeschool co-ops. See what education
international
looks like somewhere
schools,
else,
if you can. I know that's maybe a stretch. Schools in different states.
Right.
Oh my goodness. So those are the things I would have done earlier in my career. Going to Japan and visiting 5 or 6 schools in Japan, going to Belize. Now I've had that opportunity as a professor. That might not, but actually we just had a student who went abroad for a semester. We have a student looking to go abroad. We have teachers that look to take semesters off. Our university offers programs for in-service teachers to go over the summer and over breaks and study in other countries and visit schools. We have those relationships. Do it.
If it's not available to you for some reason, wherever you are, or because of financial purposes, there is much diversity to be seen around you in your city. And when you go home and visit over Thanksgiving break, whatever it might be, know your people, get a study group, challenge yourself. Those were mine, I think.
Yeah, and the reader or the listener who said humility is a hard lesson.
It's so hard.
In order to dialogue, one of the questions we have for you all is there something purposeful that you're doing to develop humility, right? So have you changed how you interact, listen, speak? Once you realize you have to do that, how are you changing? What are you doing differently? Rather than preaching an answer to you, we're asking that to you and asking you to come back to us with some answers to that. What are you doing specifically?
What are you actually doing right now?
So we'll wait for answers to that. We won't just sit here quietly, and we'll continue to have this conversation. Thank you for the question. We're going to do one more question.
We're going to do one more question. Ooh, this is an interesting one.
Can I read it? Yeah. Please. Why is Spanish not part of the curriculum in schools? Great question.
Good question. Here? Everywhere? I'll just say here because that's where the question came from. Everywhere.
I'll run.
Go.
I think the question is bigger. That is a really neat, nifty, tidy question. Why is Spanish? One could say that the official curriculum in schools reflects what we as a United States society think we value. And so the things that are not included are not considered either the work of schools or they're not valued writ large. So that's a hard thing to hear. Yeah, that's a hard thing to hear. So some things, though, in terms of public schools, like religious studies, the particular study of a Bible it's not that it's not valued by American society, U.S. society writ large. It's that there's been a conscious decision and policy to say, yeah, we do that somewhere else, right? I don't know that I can say I do know that there has not been a conscious decision. All people in the United States should learn Spanish, but we're not going to do it in schools. In fact, there's been a vague, and I'm on a limb here, so let me be careful. There's been a vague suggestion that foreign languages are important and they're included as part of the curriculum in most, if not all schools, public and private. And we do have dual language programs in the district within which we work and across the country. And we have actually it's not called tri-language, but like I know I have friends on the East Coast who their children who are native English speakers go to school in Mandarin and Spanish.
Yeah, we have a school like that here.
Okay, good. Yeah. And so there's 3 languages being spoken in that way, right? So I don't want to say that US culture does not value language acquisition. We value it differently than other countries do, for sure. And I don't think I don't think we have clear policy. We don't even have an official language as a country, let alone 2. Go ahead.
Well, and that's where I was going is
I try to bring you there.
To limit. Well done. To limit to why are we only speaking English or why aren't we speaking Spanish speaks to 2 of the languages that are represented in our buildings. And there is a logistical thing there, right? To say that an embracing thing there. I think that if we were to want to honor all of the languages that are represented in our building, the capacity level there for resources and people it would just be more limited. I mean, the building I worked in had 52 different languages within one building.
But they're not being taught.
They're not being taught, right?
Those are the languages students are bringing to the table.
Yes, but what I'm saying is to only limit it to either English or Spanish or both of those two limits it to the representative that we see in our buildings alone. So I think I would go off of AJ's, is that we represent in our curriculum what we maybe not accept, but what we want our students to
what we expect of schools and what we value as a society.
Right.
So I would say that I think, and I don't have statistics on this, I think Spanish is probably, this is interesting because the official language of the United Nations is French. So if there were a second language that were taught universally in schools in this country, one could argue for French.
Right.
I think something like Mandarin could be argued for as well because of the propensity across the globe. The same argument stands for Spanish. Right. So I think that the listener is coming from a place where, that's a solid question. Like,
it is,
especially so Spanish speaking families in this country and across the globe. Is this, someone, again, interaction, I'm not going to type it in right now, but what are the most spoken languages in the world? Mandarin and Spanish and English are up there, right? French maybe is or is not. I see Lisa's wheels turning.
Right.
But to say, hey, these are the most two common languages in the world, and we ought to say all Americans are going to be somewhat fluent in all of them. Yeah.
Right.
That's something we do through policy, right? And so I think that's a place where listeners, we can have an effect on policy. I think we need to do a little bit of that research, share some of that research, and start the conversation. I would love for all kids to have the opportunity to learn a second language. I might argue, I don't know if it's with you, listener, no, that there is some choice in that. So so that if those are the three most spoken languages, and I don't know this, but we'll just go with those for the moment, that those are choices that everyone has all the time, but we're always learning languages. I'd love to see more dual language programs. But there's a segment of society that says the words English only and thinks English should be the only word. That's real. So I don't know if your question is tongue in cheek. Like,
it seems bigger.
There are those in this country that don't value other languages, other cultures, and maybe even other countries, or they don't value them in the same way that you do, listener, or that I do. They value them differently.
It's a whole different topic.
It is, but it's connected.
It's connected. Right. But
because what are the purpose of public schools?
Right.
Wow. Right. And what is our purpose as a nation?
Right. And if you're thinking about language, probably
chime in.
There are probably a lot. There's quite a bit of prevalency for ASL as well for the deaf community and those who need to speak to us in different ways, for our students with autism who have augmentative communication devices and cannot speak for themselves, and so
we didn't bring up
ASL through a device. I just did.
I know.
So those kinds of things. I mean, there are languages and there are ways in which people need to communicate that. Regardless of what's taught in our schools, we as teachers, as individuals, absolutely have a responsibility to allow access, discussion, and interaction with our classroom settings. And so you work with your people, and you know what resources are out there, and you ask questions, and you get to know your students, and you provide them as much accessibility as possible to your classroom and to the world in which the classroom represents for them.
The question was why. I think we actually handled that well. We got to go to sort of theory and philosophy, but we also did a how and what you can do, which is, and I push this, I think teachers need to be more involved in policy making in their communities. And I think that that's on us as teachers to not just get out and vote or tell our kids to be involved, but what are we doing in terms of local policy?
Right.
How are we influencing that and getting more involved and sharing information? Because some of that is just sharing information and building more relationships with parents and colleagues and communities. How many of the parents in your school building, in your community, how many of the teachers in your school building, in your community are even engaged in this conversation? So maybe some of it starts with just, let's start to have the conversation. And the conversation starts with a question. The conversation, again, doesn't start with, we're not teaching Spanish and we ought to be. It starts with how and why could we better serve students toward whatever the goal of public education and the goal of our schools.
And their families.
Yeah.
So AJ mentioned families, but are you actually reaching out to communicate with families?
Sharing
in
research.
The way in which they communicate, though.
Sharing research, asking them to share their
right.
culture, their heritage,
Right.
their research.
But the things
giving
I'm
them
sending
platforms.
home, so the
Yeah.
papers
No,
I'm sending home and the resources I'm sending home, is it in their native language? Am I providing them resources that they can, so.
There's two different things going on there, though, right? One is
That's
advocacy.
Part of the communication.
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes.
your communication to them as an individual teacher should, again, create access to that, their child's educational environment.
And in our ongoing effort to create dialogue, I'm going to leave it with a question.
You're going to leave with a question?
No, I'm going to leave this piece, and then we'll do our wrap-up thing. The question would be, why do you believe, what research do you have that says Spanish should be mandatory in all our schools? Bring that back. That's how we create dialogue. And if you don't know, then
what made you ask that question?
Yeah, and maybe you should find out. And we as a community can build this knowledge and understanding together and start that dialogue. You're not on your own. So bring that back. There's the question I'm throwing out there. I'm going to type it. Let's sign off.
Yay.
It's time.
It was good to see you guys twice this morning again. Sorry about the sound.
The volume thing.
We'll get it taken
on
care of sometime.
Teach Talk. Authentic dialogue.
Talk. You guys enjoy your times in the classroom the next couple of days. Enjoy those beautiful students.
Be good to yourselves as well. Self-care.
Yes.
Signing off. See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.